Hi everyone, thank you so much for coming to the last session of the day. So we're talking about food. Seems about the right time. My name is Ping. I'm from Georgetown University, and today I'm going to talk about eating with family. It's a big part of our lives. But what do we talk about food? How do we talk about it? And what does that tell us about family? These are some of the questions that I asked when I first started this project. So here's a picture of me eating out with my family at a restaurant in Taipei called Din Tai Fung. It is famous for dim sum, especially xiaolongbao, a type of steamed dumplings in a basket, as you can see on the table in this picture. This is also where the data on the present analysis was collected. There are 4 participants: me, my younger brother Jason, my mom Janet, and my dad Tom. So I recorded about 23 hours of conversation every time we ate out at a restaurant or at a food court. Of course, we talked about food, as Erickson says. The contents of the dinner table, including food, condiments, and even eating utensils, can all be taken up as an important topical resource. But here I'm suggesting that the different ways we talk about food have some gender implications. It reflects our social roles in the family. There has been a lot of research on family mealtime conversation in America. And more closely related to my study is this scholarship that touches upon gender roles. For example, in this data of an Italian-American family having dinner together, Erickson noticed that women initiated food talk more than men. Looking at a middle-class American family with 2 working parents and a young child, Kendall found that the mother takes up more caretaking and food preparing positions than the father does. While these findings might seem like sometimes taken for granted, it is worth noting that these 2 studies here are exactly 20 years apart. So even though now more and more women and mothers are working full-time, it seems that this gender or sex-based division of labor at home, as Kendall describes, still persists. So here I'm hoping to see whether this is also the case in my family, a Taiwanese family with 2 working parents full-time, with 2 adult children, and also whether this gender division applies when we eat out at a restaurant, when the conversation is moved from the private setting at home to the public sphere at a restaurant. So I did a little tallying, and surprise, surprise, over 22% of Janet, my mom's, utterances are about food, followed by me, slightly over 8%, and less than 2% for both Jason and Tom. So it seems that the gender division, that gender implication is there. But of course, I don't want to just jump into conclusion and say, boom, confirmed. So I want to look more closely at how that actually happens in the interaction, the moment-by-moment interaction. That's why here I'm using framing theory. In the field of interactional sociolinguistics, framing theory can often be traced back to Bateson's idea of meta-communication, in which we communicate beyond just message at an abstract level, where we interpret and understand the event that's going on around us. And following that, both Goffman and Tennant and Wallet describe a frame as a definition of the situation or our understanding of what is going on in the interaction. Erickson also notes that in conversation, an essential aspect of local production is the continual activity of partners in telling each other what is going on in real time. But besides participants telling each other, negotiating the frame, some structural means in the context also factor in that frame construction. Familiar to most of us, Gumper's idea of contextualization cues, referring to any linguistic feature that contributes to the signaling of contextual presuppositions. This can shape the way we frame an event. And also, here I'm introducing another idea by Goffman called engrossables. It refers to a set of materials whose concatenation and interaction a person can become caught up in or carried away by. So this echoes to earlier what we saw in Erickson's study, food, condiments, and even eating utensils on the table. These objects, these external stimuli can also shape the way we frame the activity, how we interpret what's going on. And delving a little deeper into framing, Goffman suggests that we take up different footings, which essentially means our alignment with one another. And a change in our footing is another way of talking about a change in our frame for events. So when we change the way we align with each other, we're also changing the frame. For example, in Tennant and Wallet's study, they show how frame can shift. A pediatrician switches from one frame to another by using different registers and lexical items. For example, when talking to the child being examined, she would say, "Let's take a look at your tummy," and then turns to the mother and says, "This is a normal physical condition." So that's an example of using contextualization cue to switch frame. Another idea by Goffman is called the rim of the frame, which is the outermost frame that doesn't change, whatever the complexity of the inner laminations. So, for example, we can all agree that this is a presentation. This is a presentation frame. But there is a larger frame that is the AAAL conference. So even when this presentation is over, when we go into the Q&A session, or even when we go to the plenary, we're still within the AAAL conference frame. So we can say that the AAAL conference frame is the rim of the frame. That doesn't change whatever we're doing here. And this we will shortly see in the data. So the analysis, we will look at the first 11 minutes when my family wait outside of the restaurant to be seated. The original text in the data was in Mandarin Chinese. It was translated into English for analysis. And before the analysis, let's do a little mental exercise with the transcript. So on the left, you can see the traditional vertical format of transcript, like a script. But here, to show you the frame construction, I will use the column format. It looks like a table, but it's not a table, it's not a graph. It still goes from top to bottom. So here I'm going to show you how to read in column format. So in line 12, Jason says, "It's 81, ooh, one number forward." And then you'll see on the column format, Jason says this in line 12. And then followed by Janet in line 13, "Hey, I want cold dressed wooden ear mushrooms." And then Tom says, "Jason, do you think this is an electric fan?" So here you can see how the vertical format corresponds to the column format. Good. Now the challenge, the challenging part. So in the first example, we will see how the three participants each attends to different objects in the environment, and that selective attention eventually leads each of us to define the situation differently, and therefore different frames. So this here we can see how these objects, or engrossables, play a role in the frame, in the construction of frame. So in line 12, we see Jason says, it's 81, ooh, one number forward. When he says this, he is looking at the LED sign outside of the restaurant showing how many people are waiting in line. So that's what he is paying attention to. This, while he is shouting out, addressing indirectly to all the other family members, he is also calling attention to this existence of the waiting frame, that all four of us are waiting. This is one definition of the situation. And then in line 13, when Jenna says, hey, I want cold-dressed wood ear mushrooms, she names a dish by looking at the menu she holds in her hand. So the menu for her is the engrossable, the objects that shapes her idea of what the activity is. On the other hand, Tom says to Jason, directly addressing him, Jason, do you think this is an electric fan in summer and a fan heater in winter? So here he is introducing a new topic to start a conversation. And you can see that he directly and explicitly mentions the object in this utterance right next to him. So by attending to different objects in the surrounding, we have two different frames. One is food ordering, and the other is chatting frame. And now we will go a little deeper and look more closely at how the participants participate in each frame. So to identify these frames, I follow Schifrin's observation. So different frames are characterized by radically different topic structures and participant orientation. So in food ordering frame, we can see that the topic structure is very food related, and that's what really sets it apart from the chatting frame. And also the participant orientation or alignment, as in Goffman's terms, can also show that we are working, we are operating on different platform. And this, in his term, is called a performance team. It refers to individuals who cooperate to maintain a definition of a situation. In other words, a frame. So here we will see that Jenna and I are on one performance team, Jason and Tom are on the other. And to further identify these frames, I list the following speech patterns or discursive strategies for coding. So I coded each utterance and then use these codings to see how a frame is sustained, is maintained, and when, the moment when a frame shifts. So in food ordering frame, some of the speech patterns include naming a dish, making inquiries, expressing preferences, making assessments of the food, and finally giving confirmation. So the communicative goal within this frame is ultimately reaching an agreement as to what we're having for dinner. In the chatting frame, on the other hand, it's more casual. It includes introducing a topic or engaging in information exchange. So the communicative goal here is to carry a casual conversation and idle the time away. So here we can see that how by adopting different speech patterns, the four participants participate in two different frames. So in line 26, Tom says, on what day do you start organizing a summer camp that Jason was part of the committee? So here he introduces a topic, and then in response, Jason replies, and from there on, there goes the info exchange. Starting on the 5th, oh, not until the 5th, and then they have this chatting frame on one hand. And on the other hand, in line 32, I say xiaolongbao twice, naming a dish, addressing directly Janet. And then in response, she says, not the crab roll ones. So making an inquiry, asking what kind of flavor of xiaolongbao we want. So with these different speech patterns, with different discursive strategies, we can see that we have two competing frames at the same time. One is a chatting frame and the other is a food ordering frame. And these two frames persist, continue along throughout the conversation. And this is the first part where we can see that the father, Tom, tends to stick to chatting frame, and the mother, Janet, tends to stick to food ordering frame. Of course, there are moments when they kind of jump around and juggle different frames, but very rarely. Here's one example. In line 33, Tom says, "Is that an after party?" And Jason says, "Likely." So on the top right, you can see that they're still continuing having a casual conversation within the chatting frame. On the top left, on the other hand, in response to what Janet says earlier, I say, just regular xiaolongbao will be fine, make an assessment. Oh, sorry, expressing my preference. So in response, she gives confirmation. Okay, one serving of xiaolongbao. And here we have the food ordering frame. In line 38, this is where it kind of changes a little, because a change in footing or a change in alignment. I ask a question addressing both Jason and Tom directly. What kind of xiaolongbao do you want? And when they respond, when they answer my question, first Tom says in line 39, he says, whatever, I'm all, and then follow immediately by Jason's utterance. Let's first have normal ones. So they both adopt the speech patterns characteristic of food ordering frame, and then so basically they accept and adopted this topic structure about food. And also in terms of the alignment or the participant orientation, they answer my question and change their alignment. So you can see that from the arrows, they no longer have conversation between themselves, but they join this food ordering activity. So this change of alignment also indicates a change of frame, and then followed by my giving confirmation and Janet's naming more dishes. So from line 38 on, you can say that now all four of us are within the food ordering frame. So this is one example where the frame shifts, but most of the time, like I said, Janet and I are within the food ordering frame, Jason and Tom are within the chatting frame. So here I'm suggesting that I'm wondering, maybe this is something, this has something to do with who they are as a parent, as a mother and a father. So I look at some examples. For example, here you will see this relationship between mother and the food ordering activity. So in line 76, Janet names a dish. Okay, then how about amaranth greens with yuba? I give a confirmation saying okay, and then as soon as I see the price, I react in surprise, saying, oh, that's so expensive, making an assessment. So here we're still within the food ordering frame. But in reply, Janet says, making an assessment, she says he, referring to the cook or chef at a restaurant, he makes some dishes that mom does not make. So here, this is the direct translation from the Mandarin Chinese utterance. So instead of addressing herself using the first person pronoun, she uses mom. making salient her role as the mother in the family, and also drawing attention to the fact that as the mother in the family, she is the person who makes dishes, who prepares food in the household, and using that as a way to rationalize and justify her decision. I don't make this, so let's get this at a restaurant. On the other hand, Father Tom engaged in chatting frame, and here I'm arguing that this is his way of participating in his son's life. As you can see, there's more info exchange, and from line 88 on, you can see that there's more and more directive. No, drive my car, here's my plan, and then get off at my company. It seems that he is within this chatting frame, is also doing the parenting work as a father. So to conclude, when family eat out, frame construction is also influenced by the objects or engrossables in the immediate environment. This is the same at home, only that when we eat out, there are more external stimuli at play. Second, Janet and Tom adopt different speech patterns characteristic of each frame to interact with other family members, thereby performing the traditional social roles associated with mother and father. So earlier we saw that the statistics, that little tally, seems to suggest that we do see a gender pattern here, but with a closer look at the transcript and the interaction, we can see how they carry over these rows that were found in the past studies at home to the public setting. And lastly, framing as a theory and as a way to look at interaction not only serves as a means for parents to redefine the situation and present themselves as parents, but also provides a window for researchers to look into the way family interaction is transformed in different settings. Yeah. So, thank you very much. Let's switch the frame to Q&A session. Yes.
I have one quick clarification question. So is this whole conversation taking place in the waiting area or at the table?
In a waiting area.
Right, okay. That's my thought. And as you saw in the first excerpt, where you said, when you look at looking at the LED, so the waiting frame, I thought somehow the entire thing looks like waiting.
Yes.
Rather than food or chatting. I think that the nature of waiting is that there is no set activity that needs to happen at the moment.
Yeah.
Right? So people do things differently. So you say one thing and the other people say different things, and that's what's happening, it seems to me, right here. So I guess it seems like you jumped into this naming dish ordering food frame, but it seems that the frame is really not, I don't know, I don't use the concept of frame, but frame is not a frame, but it's more like fluid. Like everybody can do anything at the moment.
Yes.
But once they sit at the table, I think the activity of ordering becomes more of the core activity, and probably people just concentrate on that activity of deciding on the food. And I was wondering if that's the case. If when you got at the table, was there any change that happened in terms of the ways that they, interacted? I mean, the father participated. Did he participate in the ordering activity, or did he continue talking with the other son, your brother?
Yes. So
after was before.
After we were seated, the two frames. The food ordering. This distinction still persisted.
Okay.
Only that, like you said, the waiting frame no longer existed. I would say the waiting frame here is more like something that's underlying. We all know that, yes, we're waiting, but at the same time, we're doing something different. But also, like you said, when the setting changes, it also affected the way we understand what is going on and how we interact with each other, and including how we interact with the environment. When we were seated, after we were seated, let's go back to that chart. This was the entire conversation. So I would say the food related items were really heavily used by Janet, and I was part of it too, because this was not the first time, but for me at this restaurant. And let me show you how much she talks about food. So this is much later into the conversation, and as you can see, like waiting is not so prominent here, but you can see how Janet really pushes for food ordering, like naming one dish after another. Do you want this? Do you want that? And really maintaining that food ordering frame there. Yes.
Yeah, I think just to add one more thing, I think this depends on the type of restaurant as well, because this is a dim sum place. It's a shared
yes, that's
dishes, right? Rather than having individual meals. If it's an individual based dishes, then you have to think about what you order.
Yes, like individually. Right. That's a good point. Yes, thank you. But just adding one point. But the reason why I chose this part of this part for analysis was also because when we start eating, the conversation is very much like what a typical conversation is like. But what really differentiates eating out from having dinner at home is this part where we talk about what we're going to have. So this is the way I see it. Food ordering corresponds to food ordering at a restaurant corresponds to food preparation at home. So, like I said earlier, when mother is usually associated with food preparing, here I'm thinking that it seems that when a setting is at a restaurant, it seems that mother has more to do with food ordering.
So in terms of if you go back to the breakdown of like how many utterances about food by different speakers, so do you see that like obviously like your whole situation is you're waiting and like that's the rip of the frame, right? But in terms of like obviously your mother kind of constituted this like food organizer role through her framing of the food interactions. Did you see any other kind of I would say like maybe like micro expressions of identity in terms of like the frames that they put together? Like your father, did he have any kind of, I know like, you know, some like the fathers know best dynamic, you know, like tell your father about whatever. Did you see any of those kinds of like other identities made manifest in the talk?
Yes. What's the time? Oh, okay. Let me just quickly wrap this up. And so yes, so father's So this is the example that we just saw, father giving directives, like this is what we're gonna do, I'm gonna do this, we're gonna do that. But also he is the planner. Like in this example, we can see that on the left, on the right hand side, in line 68, he says, later, after we finish, let's walk around Yongkang Street, around that, nearby that restaurant, check out the snacks, eat a little drink, a little like that. So over throughout the dinner conversation, he also takes up this planner role, like telling us, so we can do this, let's do that. Yep. So, yeah, and it's my time. Thank you very much.